This is Gemara Pesachim Daf Mem Aleph, all the learning for the month of Teves, as it is answered as the Schos Ilin Neshama for Leah Rasha Bas Servari Leib, whose yard site is today, Friday, Daf Mem Aleph's Daf. Her Neshama should have an Aliyah, the Schos of the entire Chabur is learning, should be a Schos Ilin Neshama, for as well as the Schos of the Ilin Neshama, Leib ben Yaakov, her Neshama should have an Aliyah. Of course, all our Chelim, Chaim Pinchas ben Malki, Demir ben Yakir, Emmanuel, and Veyu, Chaim and Sar Shalom Sibin Reiz Edel, Sarah Bas Kenendel, Ita Bas Siyam Bas Chayes, Sayus Chaim Sarezi, Yosel, Venendel, Lev Shalom Shalom Bas Amim, Shafiq, Shulchan, Fal David, Yitu, V'nacham, Navizel, Lirach, Tavi, Musa, Bechil, Shul, and Taylor, Luram, Siyam, Masha, Esther, Shmuel ben Tehila, David ben Shmuel ben Tehila, B'Sayir Sha'ar, Chayle Yisrael. Okay. Gemara Pesachim Daf Mem Aleph. We're going to pick it up in Mem and Beis. We did the Mishnah yesterday, but let's quickly chazer over the Mishnah. We're continuing the theme of putting flour into other items, and when it becomes chametz, you cannot put the kemach, the flour, into the charaises, or into the mustard. Now the tzad shava, what's chardal and charaises? These are sharp items. And therefore, as we'll see in the Gemara, perhaps there's vinegar involved, perhaps not, and therefore that's the reason why we would think that maybe it would become chametz, or maybe it would not become chametz, because the sharpness, as we've seen, might prevent it becoming chametz. Ve'im nasa, let's say you did it, yeichel miyad, you could eat it. Tanakama's opinion. Rav Meir Omer, no, also you're not allowed to eat it. That's din number one in the Mishnah. Din number two, now we move away from matzah. We're going to finish the parak with the dinim of carbon pesach. When you cook carbon pesach, we all know it has to be cooked. It has to be cooked mavushal, sli, etc. Not mavushal, but sli. We'll see in the Gemara. But one of the things, you cannot cook it with liquids, neither water, mashkin, or meipiris. Avol, what are you allowed to do? Sachin umatvilin isa. You're allowed to smear it while it's roasting, and matvilin, as you're eating it, you're allowed to dip it bahen. That is the second half of the Mishnah. And now the third half of the Mishnah is the water that the baker uses to put his hands in, to wash his hands off while he's kneading the dough, etc. Says the Mishnah, and you have to pour it out, because the water becomes chametz from all the flour, gets mixed together. So three parts of the Mishnah. We're going to begin with part number one, which is the flour that you're placing into the chardal or to the charaises. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Kahana, machlokes ateicha chardal avtei charaises divrei hakol yisarf miyad, which is obviously interesting. The Mishnah started off said you can't put it into charaises or chardal. If you do it, eat it. Rameir says aser. So the question is, this machlokes, the Tanakama said eat it. Rameir says aser. Is that going on both dinim, like you would think if you read the Mishnah, or is it only going on one of the dinim? Says Rav Kahana that the machlokes is only a chardal, this second half of the second din, which is the mustard, and we can understand the difference, obviously, as Rashi in the very last line of the whole Amid, Rashi points out, because chardal mustard is very strong, and that's the reason why it has a different din, that it potentially does not cause it to become chametz. That's what Rav Kahana says, and that is where the Tanakama lets you eat it. But Tananami Hachi says the Gemara, we have a riot, this din of Rav Kahana, a nice din kamach l'toich hacharaises, can't put in the charaises. Vim nasan, yisarif miyad, burn it. So clearly this Brisa concurs with the opinion of Rav Kahana that what? That when it's in the chardal, that is when we have a machlekes, the mustard. When it's in the charaises, we have no machlekes. Amar Ravuna Breid Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. I'm sorry, yes?
You still have to eat the charaises right away?
The charaises, that's what do the Brises say? The Brises said that the one more time. The Brisa said the charis is going to be aser, and no, the opposite again. Because chardal, let's pick this out. Because chardal is sharp, that's when there's potentially the opinion of Rav Meir that will allow you to eat it. Meaning you put it right in, you don't have to worry, you can eat it right away. By the charaises, it's not sharp, the opposite. Charaises, it's aser, and if you do it, you have to burn it right away. You're not allowed to eat it. Since it doesn't have that sharpness, it's not going to kill the flour, and therefore we're afraid it's going to become chametz by the charaises. By the chardal, by the mustard, we're more lenient. The Tanakama says you can eat it right away, and Rav Meir says absolutely not. Now, continuing on this theme, Amar Ravuna Breid Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel Lacha. They're passing like the chachamim, which means in the case of the chardal, the case of the mustard, you're allowed to eat it right away. So Nachman says Ravuna Breid Rav Yehuda, who just said the last thing that we passed like the chachamim, which says that you're allowed to eat the chardal, the mustard, right away. Acharaises kamamar or chardal kamamar. Meaning, the way that I just explained the Gemara was when you read the Gemara straight. He said, halacha is like the Chachamim. What do the Chachamim just say? Adin by chardal. Now, that's obviously not necessarily the way that things happen in life. And Rav Nachman, Rav Yehuda just said, we pass like the Chachamim. The question is, when do we pass like the Chachamim? Is this psak I say, also by Charaises, or only by Chardal? Meaning, is the Gemara in sequential order that the whole machlekes only happens by Chardal, or maybe not? We have no way. Maybe Rav Huna is going all the way back and saying that they're arguing. Very interesting question. Says the Gemara, Amar Lei. He responds, Lamei nafkamina. Why do you care? Now, what do you mean, Lamai nafkamina? It's a tremendous nafkamina. So our Mepharshim here that come along to speak out the cheshbon. But either way, let's continue. Lamai nafkamina says Gemara, Rav Kahana, like we thought. That's the question. Meaning, when you said you're positive Chachamim, are you going within Rav Kahana that they're only arguing by chardal, by mustard, or no? Are you saying in everyone? Amar, you respond to Leishamili. I didn't hear anything, which we know. What does that really mean? Kalaimar, Laisvirli, he disagrees, and he holds that they argue by both, even by Charaises. Amar Ravashik, I've said to Rav Kana Mistavra, even though we just saw an opinion that holds that there's going to be a machlekes even by Charaises. What would the machlekes be? As everyone's wondering, it's because even though we keep on saying Charaises is not sharp, but Charaises does have some vinegar entity to it, which is what Rashi back in the Mishnah taught us, that the charaisis that they're talking about has vinegar in it. So that's the sad. But says the Gemara, says Rav Ashi, we pass it like Rav Kahana midamar Shmuel ein halacha ki Rav Yesi. My love. What does that mean that we don't pass like Rav Yesi? Again, Rav Yesi was yesterday's Gemara. What did Rav Yesi say? That's about the vinegar. Now we're going to understand why we're only passing by chardal and acharaisis. My love, simusi udulay samis. That was Rav Yesi. Rav Yesi said that vinegar causes it to shrink, disallowing it from becoming chametz. So from the fact that we're saying we don't paskin like Rav Yesi, what does that seemingly teach us? That the vinegar does not cause it to shrink, and rather, it will cause it to become chametz. And that's why we're saying we're going to paskin only by the chardal, by the mustard, not by the charaisis. What do you mean charaisis has vinegar? Great. Who says vinegar is good for you? Vinegar could be disastrous for you. If we don't go with Rav Yesi, then what comes out is that the vinegar is going to be terrible for you, because the vinegar is going to cause it to become chametz, as the Gemara assumes that they're opposite extrees. Says the Gemara, what's your ayah? Maybe he just holds, we don't go with Rav Yesi that the vinegar causes it to shrink, but it doesn't cause it to necessarily become chametz. It's more like pariv, it's more like smack in the middle, but still, says the Gemara, Rav Ashi still holds. Sorry, so Rav Ashi did want to say that it's mistaver like Rav Kahana, but the Gemara says that's not necessarily a raya to that din.
Like my fairs doesn't help it.
Yeah, that would be the tzad. Rashi says, "Do I have a kemayim?" It's not like water. Very good. Says the Gemara, "Ein mevashlin." So we just finished matzah, we finished mar, and now we're up to Karban Pesach. Mirz Hashem, very soon. Let's hope. Ein mevashlin. You cannot cook the Karban Pesach. We said in water and other items. Says the Gemara, we're going to start darshaning up Sukkim. Tanarabon, and says the Gemara, b'mayim. Says in the Torah, b'mayim. Ainli el b'mayim, that you're not allowed to cook it. As the pasuk, I'm sure many of you have inside the Gemara. The pasuk says, "Al taychlu menu." No. You're not allowed to eat it partially raw, as we'll see. Bashal mavushal b'mayim ki im sli eish. It has to be a sli roasted on a fire. You know, a nice rotisserie over there, roasted on the fire, no water. So ainli ela b'mayim shar mashkim minayin. How do we know you're not allowed to cook it with other liquids as well? Water does not add in taste. Water doesn't add in taste, and yet asurin it's also other liquids that add in taste. Of course, it's forbidden. If water is forbidden to cook it with, certainly other juices. That is the Tanakama. Rabbi Omer, no, a different way of learning. B'mayim in li elamayim. It says in the Torah, can't cook with water. Shar mashkin minayin tamalaymar ubashel mavushal mikol makom. The double wording ubashel mavushal. Why did it say that? To teach me any form of cooking, even not only with water, but even with shar mashkin. Nachlegis Tanakama and Rebbe, how we learn out? Are we learning it out from a Kal V'Chaimer, or are we learning it out from the Torah? It says Gemara Mai Benayu. What's the community between the Tanakama and Rebbe? Benayu tzli kedar, a pot roast. What's a pot roast? Pot roast has no liquid, but it has liquid. What liquid does it have? The liquid from itself. The lamb, the sheep, the Karban Pesach itself that's sitting inside the pot. So you don't put any liquid in, but as it cooks, the liquid of itself is going to come out. So if you hold that there's a special drasha of ubashal mevushal, that's going to be aser. Why? Because at the end of the day, there's going to be liquid. If you hold that the reason was that shar mashkin or mefigin taimim, that's a kal v'chaimer, but over here you don't have the kal v'chaimer because you have no liquids. Let's have Rashi speak to that, like we just said. Says Rashi is directly across the Gemara, 3 lines up. Sli kedar shemavash b'keder beloy mayim ubeloy shemashkim elamayim adaflatim mishmei noi. The liquid comes out of item itself. Here it's going to be mutter. Why? Because the whole Kavachaimer was that Shar Mashin gives off time, gives off taste. But there's no liquid at all, so it doesn't give off taste. The Rabbi Yavnei Rabua, that it's an extra pasuk, Vashel Mevushal, the extra pasiku, Hainami Vashel Mevushu, Lamaisi, here it's going to be called cooked, because there will be the liquids. That is the end of this drasha. Again, Tanikama learns from Kavachaimer, Rabbi learns it out from Vashel Mevushal. V'Rabbanan, the Tanikama, Hayu Vashel Mevushal, Mayavdalu. What do they do with the pasuk of Vashel Mevushal? Like we learned in a brace. If you cooked it and then you roasted it, or you roasted and then you cooked it, chayiv, you're chayiv. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. I understand that. Why? So what did you do? You cooked it. Who cares that you afterwards went to roast it? You cooked it, so of course you're chayiv. Why is that a problem? That is sliesh. You roasted it. Who cares if you subsequently cooked it? Why is that going to mess it up? Am I? So therefore, says the Gemara, we think that that's what the actual drush of Bishlam Mevushal is going to teach us. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Let's think back. We had this concept already when it came to matzah. Omer Rav Kahana, Hamani Rav Yosi. Did Tanu go into the Raisa? Yoitzin Burakik Hasharui Ubimevushal. We're about 20 lines down. First one of the line is Ditanya, where Yoitze with Rakik, those are the wafers that were soaked and were cooked, that were not dissolved, meaning you still could see the wafer, you still could see the matzah over there. It says Rameir. Rabbi Yosi Omer, Yoitzin Burakik Hasharui. You're Yoitzin, you're Yoitzin the mitzvah, if it's soaked, not if it's cooked, even it doesn't dissolve. That was the opinion of Rav Yosi. So says the Gemara, we're going with the opinion of Rav Yosi. Why? Because what do you see that Rav Yosi holds? Rav Yosi holds that once you cook it, it destroys the item, right? Because what did Rav Yosi say? Rav Yosi said your Yotzei when it's soaked, but not if it's cooked. Even though the cooking did what? Did nothing. It didn't do anything to it. Still, you're not Yotzei. So too in our case, says the Gemara. So again, what is the side of Rav Yosi that the cooking destroys it? Says the Gemara, in our case, if you did sli, you put it over a fire, and then you did mavushal, then you cooked it, according to Rav Yosi, what happened? Oh, the cooking destroyed it. Okay, if the cooking destroyed it, so now you lost your sli. So why are you going to be Yotzei? That's why we need the actual pasuk of Bashel, mavushal. That is what the Gemara assumes, that according to the Rabbanan, they're using the actual pasuk of Bashel, mavushal to teach me sli and then bishul, is going with the opinion of Rav Yosi. Says Ula, how do you know that? Ula, maybe that's explicitly what it's teaching you. Whenever you have an extra reboy, it doesn't necessarily have to make sense. You're trying to make it make sense that if it's sli and then bishul, going according to the opinion that says the bishul kills the sli, and therefore no, I tell you going to everyone. Why? And therefore the extra drasha teaches me that it's not going to work. Tanur Rabbanan, says Gemara, moving along in cases of cooking the carbon Pesach. And that's the end of that machlekes. Again, just to put everything into perspective, we just learned about machlekes Tanikama and the Rabbanan and Rebbe, how we know that you're not allowed to cook it with shar mashkin, whether it's kal v'chaimer or whether it is bash mavushal. And then we said according to the Rabbanan, what do they do with the bash mavushal? They come to teach us that even though you did sli, so you would think it's great, and then you subsequently cooked it, and therefore you destroyed it. That's what bash mavushal comes to teach us. Tanur Rabbanan says the Gemara. I'm sorry. Rebbe argue on that din. That's what it would seem at the moment. You are right, because Rebbe doesn't have a Joshua. Definitely seems that way right now. I say right now, it's because I don't actually think, usually right, normally the Gemara would now go back to Rebbe, and the Gemara does not, and it's a good question. I don't have a good answer. I'm sure it's discussed, but I don't know right now. Let's continue. We'll have to look it up. Tanur Rabbanan says the Gemara, Yachol sloi kol tzarkai. You would think that if you fully roasted it, yechayiv, you're going to be chayiv. What does it mean you fully roasted it? That's called burnt. No, the food's not burnt. It's just well done. No, that's called burnt. So, says the Gemara, you have to do tzli. You have to roast it. What if you do? You roast and roast and roast. Now it's burnt. So you would think you're chayiv, that it's not good. Talmud says the Torah, no, don't eat it partially cooked, or cooked in water. No, partially cooked. And that is not going to be something that you're going to be chayiv for if it is burnt. So if it's burnt, No, because it's not called sli. Meaning, basically, we always have to know where does the syllable go, where does the emphasis go on. On one hand it says sli, one hand it says it can't be. No, it can't be called bashal bavusha. So therefore, the Gemara now is going to try to figure out which is the ikr. So again, one more time. I think I messed that one up. Let's go back one more line. That is the pasuk. Na partially cooked ubash b'vushal amarti lecha v'lo ishatzlo kol tzarkai. So heichi dami. So what is the case? Amar Ravashi deshavye charucha, that it was charged, it was singed. That's going to be the case. So says the Gemara, you will not be chayiv because the ikar is that it has to be either no or bashal v'ushal b'mayim, but if it is seloi kol tzarkai shavye charucha, singed, charred, and burnt, you will not be chayiv. Okay, now let's continue. Tanarabban in a similar vein, yachal eichal kzayis chayiv. You would think if you eat it raw, you're chayiv. Tamalay maral dachmenu, no, don't eat it partially cooked, ubash b'vushal, and cooked it and cooked. No, ubashel amarti l'cha v'loy chayiv, but not raw. Seemingly raw, you won't be chayiv if you eat it raw. Yoch, I would have thought you ate mutter. Okay, so maybe it's mutter. Sounds great. Tamalay mar says the Torah, ki misli eish, that it has to be roasted on a fire. Hechi dami. No, says the Gemara. Okay, so what's the case of no partially cooked? Amarav k'dami parsoi arvanim, which means it's partially roasted. So the word no means arvanim, avarnim, which is partially cooked. So again, could it be raw? The answer is theoretically yes. You won't be over nisa daraisa, but are you allowed to do it? Absolutely not. Because it has to be tzli eish. And what is a na mean? Na means partially cooked. So again, partially cooked is the nisa daraisa. Cooked in liquids is the nisa daraisa. Raw and singed are not isuri daraisa, but you're not allowed to do it. And it has to be tzli eish. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chisda, continuing how you cook this item. You cook in the hot springs of Taveri b'Shabbos, potter, which of course means potter of Lazar. Generally. Here, actually, it's not so pashit, but generally potter means potter of Lazar. It's an iser derabon. And b'Pesach shabishlei b'cham Taveri chayiv. If you cook your karm Pesach in the waters of Taveri, you're going to be chayiv iser deraisa. Says Gemara, I don't understand. Ma'ishna the Shabbos al tol zeish. Why in Shabbos you not chayiv the toldos eish binan? You only chayiv on Shabbos for toldos of eish. That's the reason why it's probably nisa derabanan, because you are chayiv for cooking in Shabbos in other ways. Generally, it's just not. It's deraisa, not so pashib. Let's leave it because toldos chama itself might be mutter. Either way, let's leave the Shabbos dinam alone. But again, ma'ishna the Shabbos delay the toldos eish binan has to be fire. Veleka, and it's not Pesach nami lav toldos eishu. Is it not toldos eish? Meaning, so why by Karim Pesach are you going to be chayiv? Amar Rava, my chayiv. What does it mean? Tekatani deka'avar misham tzli eish. You're over the fact that it wasn't tzli eish. That is the reason why that like if you see in Rashi points out the second to last Rashi and Abed, Mishom Tzli Eish, Lav Deloy Soichal, Ki in Tzli Eish Ika, Veloy Lav De Bishol, Visavar Loikin Alav Shabachalois. And this is where we're going to start a discussion when you get Malchus. So whenever you say Chayiv, usually means you get Malchus. There's a concept of Lav Shabachalois, which means a general Lav. Do you get Malchus for a general Lav? And that's what's coming. That's what we're getting right now. That says Rava. What does Chayiv mean? That it had to be Tzli Eish and it wasn't, and that's the reason why you're going to be Chayiv. Says the Gemara, Rav Chibra, Rav Nasan Masilo, Rav Chisda Behedya. He learned this in Rav Chisda, which is what? That if you cook in the Chamit Tvar Chayiv, you learned it explicitly. Rav Chisda, Vash Chamit Tvar b'Shabbos Potter, b'Pesach Chamit Tvar Chayiv. Why? Meaning, what was he learned Behedya? What? Shavar Misham Tzli Eish. The reason why you're Chayiv is because you didn't do it Tzli Eish. Meaning, not necessarily it's because it's called cooked, which is a different issue, right? You're not allowed to cook it cooked. It has to be tzli eish. So not that it's called cooked, but it's not called tzli eish. Amar Rava says, Rava, achleina. If you eat it partially cooked, what is the halacha? Loike shtayim. You get 2 malchus, okay? Mevushal. Why do you get 2 malchus? Let's just see. One time we'll see the Rashi, and we're not going to see it each time. Rashi says over here, loike shtayim, misham loy seichal na, number 1, umisham loy seichli ki'em sli eish. Again, just to make this very clear, it's the same thing we keep on having. It's because the Torah wrote both halves. It said it has to be roasted, and it can't be this. So says Rava, says Rava. that you're over for both of those points. That one is that you didn't do it the way you're supposed to do it, and you did it wrong. So like shtayim mevushal. Let's say you cook it. Like a shtayim. You also over 2. No umevushal. If it's partially cooked and you cooked it, meaning you cooked it, with the liquid, but you don't do it fully, then like a shalish, you're over on 3. Abaye Amar no ein loikin alav shabachlolis. You're not loikin alav shabachlolis. The general rule that taught us that it has to be cooked properly. That's a general rule. So that you are not going to be chayav for. Like Rashi says, it's koilol kol minei beshulim. All types of cooking are included in it. She'inan sli. The fact it says it has to be sli means what can it not be? Everything. That's a lav shebechlolis. Says Abaye, you don't get the malchus lav shebechlolis. But what you do get, seemingly you get the other malchus. Says the Gemara, that was 2 ways of learning Abaye. Igadiamri, some learned Abaye, tarte udeloy laki, chadami laki. You're still going to get 1. Igadiamri, chadanami loy laki. Why? Delomiyachade lave. An interesting rule that it's not a specific lav that which you did. Kalav de chasima. That the only time that you're going to get malchus is if the lav is similar to the lav of chasima, muzzling your animal. And therefore, that's when we have a specific lav that you're over. But anytime you're not over a specific lav, then you're not going to get any malchus at all. So machlekes, when Abaye comes along and Abaye says you're not loikin of lav shebechlolis, does that mean you're not loikin at all? Or does that mean you just don't get that additional lav, but you're still going to get the lav for eating it raw, etc.? That is Abaye. Comes along Rava, and Rava's going to now take this din that we just had Abaye, take this machlekes, so we had a din of Abaye versus Rav, right? I keep on making this mistake. Rava, thank you. Rava. So we had the machlekes Abaye versus Rava. Now we're going to take that machlekes and apply it to the din of a nazir. We know a nazir is not allowed to eat wine, grapes, and all the derivatives. Question is, different parts that the nazir ate, what malchus you're going to get? And it's very similar wording that's used by the nazir, and therefore it's going to be very similar dinim. Now we have here by matzah. Says by Karban Pesach. I'm sorry. Says the Gemara 5 lines down. Rava says, Achal zog. If you ate the grape skins. Zog are the skins, like ishtayim, you get 2 malchus. Chartzin, if you eat the grape seed, like ishtayim, you get 2. Again, again, it's the same thing over there. You're not allowed to have anything of grapes. And 2, the Torah speaks out, you can't have zog, you can't have chartzin, you can't have each one of these items. So says Rava, you get for each and every one, zog v'chartzin, again, same exact thing. If it's both of them, then like in shalosh, you get 3 malchus. Abaye Amar, no, in like a lav shebechlolis. You don't get lav for the general rule that you can't eat any grape derivatives. You don't get a lav, you don't get malchus for being over that. Some say, Tarti udeloy laki. You don't get 2 malchus. Chadami laki, but you're going to get 1. It's not a specific lav, kalav de chasima, and therefore you will not get malchus. Those are the 2 machlekesim, first cousins to each other, the nazir and the Karban Pesach. Says Gemara Tanarabban, Potter, you eat a kezayis of partially cooked Karban Pesach before Pesach, not at the right time. Not at the right time. You have to eat the Karban Pesach at night. Not at the right time. Potter. You're potter. Kezayis no misha chashecha. You eat a kezayis of it partially cooked at night time. Chayiv. Okay, 2 dinim. Ochal kezayis sli mibayid yayim. If you eat a kezayis of it roasted during the day, now what do you have? Now you have that it was cooked the appropriate way, but it's at the wrong time. Lo yipasal atzmei b'vnei chabura. You don't pass yourself from being part of the chabura, which the din is that you have to always be part of a group eat Karban Pesach, and you can't be part of 2 groups eat Karban Pesach. So you would think that if you eat the right meat at the wrong time, maybe that's called being part of a different group. Says the Gemara, no. Next case, kezayis Sli mishech hashecha. If you had a kezayis of it roasted at nighttime, then you go taste the Karban Pesach. Let's say you had your mitzvah. Now the group that you're supposed to be involved with, you cannot be involved in. That is brayset number 1. Again, if you eat it during the day, obviously that is the wrong time. If you eat it raw, you're going to be potter. If you eat it raw at night, you're going to be a chayiv. If you eat a kezayis by day, it does not disallow you from eating at night. You eat kezayis at night, yes, disallows you. Tani learns a different braysa. You would think if you eat a kezayis of raw during the year chayiv, and really it's a kal v'chaymer. Understand? At the time that you have to eat a roasted at night, yes, no, you're not eating it raw. At a time that you can't even eat it roasted, at a time you can't even eat it by day. So for sure you can't eat it raw. So what's going on over here? Very good. It's not the zman to eat it, but seemingly it would be 2 things wrong. You're eating it at the wrong time and eating it the wrong way of cooking it. Or or maybe not. Maybe learn the Torah the other way. Maybe only at a time where you can't eat it, meaning during the day, that's when the law of eating a raw applies. At a time that you could eat a raw, maybe at that point there's not going to be a law to eat it. No. Meaning we don't know, again, the Torah wrote very generic and ambiguous, so we don't necessarily know how to learn it. So the Gemara is bothered. Do we say that all these Isurim only apply when you can eat it? Or do we split it in half? And we say when you can eat it sli, that's when you're not going to get a lav, ironically, for eating it, no. But when you could eat it, but when you can't eat it sli, that's when there is the lav. Now someone's going to wonder, how can this be? It sounds very funny. Shari Hutar, Mechlaloi, Eitz al Sli. The reason is because it was allowed to be tzli. And once it was allowed to be tzli, that's the reason why it would be different. Tal Malaymer, the Torah says, Al Teichlu Mimenu Na. Now the Gemara is going to teach us how we're going to learn this out. And with this, we're going to conclude for the day. Al Teichlu Mimenu Na, you should not eat a raw, ubash b'vushal b'mayim. And you should cook it with water. Ki'im tzli eish. That was the pasuk. She'ein Tal Malaymer ki'im tzli eish. Why do you have to say ki'im tzli eish? Why did it say that? To teach you. At the time that you eat it sli, that's when you can't eat it raw. That's when you're not allowed to eat it raw. That is how the first way the Gemara dashes up the pasuk. Rabbi Omer, akra ani bashal. Mivushal. Why did, again, we sort of started this in Amud Aleph when we had the double Ashim, now he goes into the words itself. It says Bashal, why does it say Mivushal? Shiach, I would think Eli El Shebishlei Mishecha Sheikha. You would have thought that maybe only if you're over the cooking at night, right? You have to do both of them. So maybe you would have thought it's only when you cook it at night. Bishlei Mibeyoy Minai, and how do you know, says Rabbi, if you cooked it during the day, Tamalaymar Bashel Mivushal Mikol Ma'koyim, that even if you cooked it by the day, then it would be a problem. And now just to make a full circle on Amud Aleph, we have this din for something else. Rabbi, let's see, Kedar, Ulishar Mashkin, Rabbi uses for a different drasha to teach us that you're going to be over. That was the shita of Rabbi for even Shar Mashkin. And came Leimakra, answers the Gemara, the Torah should have said Eimakra, Oy Bashel, Oy Mivushal. Meaning if it was just a double wording that came in as extra reboy to add on Slikeder, to add on Shar Mashkin, should have said that. My Bashel Mivushal, that's funny wording. Shmas Minatarti. Number one, it teaches me you can't cook slikeder and other liquids. And number two, it teaches me what we just saw right now, that it's not only at the time that you could cook it. It's not only at night, that if you cook it by day, you're also going to be over